Projecting the Bills' 2025 target distribution reveals some very interesting dynamics about the Buffalo Bills offense. I'll explain that today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. The objective today is to project the Buffalo Bills 2025 target distribution. It's a very interesting project. And in doing this project, I arrived at some interesting conclusions about this Buffalo Bills offense. And so we'll attack this conversation in three different ways. First, we will figure out how many times the Bills are going to throw the football. Then we'll figure out who those targets are going to go to. And then lastly, we will get into the key takeaways and key variables that this project revealed to me. And so buckle up. This is going to be an interesting conversation. Let's start by acknowledging the vacated targets that are no longer on the team when you consider 2024 versus 2025. And you no longer have the 50 targets that went to Mac Hollins, the 32 that went to Amari Cooper, the 8 that went to Quentin Morris, and the 9 that went to Marquez Valdes-Scantling. That equates to 20% of the 2024 targets being vacated entering 2025, which is a huge difference compared to where that fell entering 2024, where 57% of the Bills' targets were vacated. Much different scenario this time around. And so with that in mind, I want to give you my best estimation for where I think this is going to settle out in 2025. Now, some things to keep in mind. First of all, this assumes full health for 17 games for all players. I don't think there's any other way you can do it. And obviously that will make things fluctuate based on availability. Secondly, keep in mind that this is a thought exercise. I will not nail all of this, but I am showing my work, and my goal, as always, is to give you a conclusion that I arrive to with a process that is defendable. Right? That's critical to me. And then also keep in mind that every year I do full stat projections for the Bills, which I will do after training camp, after I get some eyes on this team, and I'll give you my full 2025 projections then. But this will serve as a pretty good foundation for the passing game target distribution. So question one to answer is, how many times is Josh Allen going to throw the football in 2025? Last year, he threw it 483 times. And that was by far the least amount of passing attempts that he's had since 2019. In 2020, he had 572 attempts. 2021, 646. 2022, 567. 2023, 579. Last year, 483. The Bills are not a high-volume passing offense, and they've become even less of a high-volume passing offense under Joe Brady. In 9 starts for Josh Allen under Joe Brady in 2023, Josh averaged 33.11 passing attempts per game. In 2024, in 19 games under Joe Brady, he averaged 29.73 passing attempts per game. And so when I consider how many times will Josh Allen throw the ball in 2025, I'm going to project 30 passing attempts per game. 17 times 30 equals 510 passing attempts. Now, last year it was 483, but keep in mind, Josh Allen didn't throw the ball in that week 18 game against the New England Patriots. I'm assuming 17 games of production. So 30 passing attempts per game, 510 attempts in 2025. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that attempts do not equal targets. Attempts includes spikes, batted throws, and throwaways. Targets do not. And if you go over each of the last 3 years is the sample size that I went through, roughly 4% of passing attempts for the Bills are throwaways, batted throws, and spikes. So when I take 510 and I figure out what 4% of that is, that's 20 attempts that will not be targets. So 510, the attempts that I'm projecting at 30 per game, minus 20, which is the 4% reduction for throwaway, spikes, and batted balls, I am left with 490 targets to distribute in 2025. That's how many targets I am going to project. And then in the next segment, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to distribute them. But there's some factors that I want you to be aware of as we work into this. And I've said this already. I will say it again. The Bills are not a high volume passing team. They're not. As a team, the Bills were 26th last year in total passing attempts. 26th out of 32 teams. They're 28th in percentage of plays that were passes. They were 5th in percentage of plays that were runs. The Bills run the ball. They are not a high volume passing team. And of course, Josh Allen's rushing production factors into this, but he only scrambles about 50 times a year. That's, if you go over the recent history, about 50 of his passing attempts turn into runs. So it's not that significant where, well, it's a running quarterback, so of course there's going to be a higher percentage of run plays. No, it's about 50. It's not that significant. Josh Allen last year was 14th in the NFL in passing attempts, 483. And that does, of course, include week 18 where he did not pass the ball. If you were to add 30 attempts, he only climbs one spot to 13th in terms of passing attempts. Joe Burrow, 652 passing attempts. Patrick Mahomes, 581. You're talking 100 more attempts. Even Baker Mayfield, 570. Jared Goff, 539. Josh just doesn't throw the ball as much as those quarterbacks are asked to throw the ball. And so that's the reality. Like, I want you to hear that message. The Bills are not a high volume passing offense. And so as I lead into this next segment where I give you this passing distribution, I would guess that all of these numbers are going to come in lower than you're thinking right now. But you have to be realistic about what the total amount of passing attempts is going to be. If you go to FanDuel right now and you were to look up the over-under for Josh Allen passing yards in 2025, it's just under 3,800. Baker Mayfield threw for 4,500 yards last year. Unless something is drastically different structurally about the way the Bills play offensive football this year, which I don't think will be the case, you have to acknowledge that the Bills are not a high-volume passing offense. Another critical factor here is, for 2025 in particular, is the late season weather games. The last 6 games on the Bills schedule, November 30th or later. You got 3 in Buffalo, and your 3 road games are at Pittsburgh, at New England, and at Cleveland. you got a lot of potential for weather games late in the season. And we know where Josh really racks up passing numbers is in domes, right? Covered stadiums, whatever you want to call them. There's only 2 dome games this year, Atlanta and Houston. And I'm excited for Atlanta. I think Josh is going to throw for lots of yards against the Falcons. But Houston might have the best pass defense in the league, and it's a short week for Buffalo on Thursday Night Football. So not a super ripe opportunity. I mean, Josh was 9 for 30 in Houston last year. I'll be better this year, I'm sure of that. But, you can't look at that like you did the Rams or the Lions and think, boy, 400 yards incoming for Josh Allen. That's going to be a tough assignment. So all of those variables in place to tell you that I think that there are 490 targets for the Bills to distribute this year. And coming up on the other side of it, I'm going to tell you how I think that will sort itself out. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it so easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. These playoffs have been exciting. I've really been enjoying getting in on the over-under projections for statistical categories for players, whether it's points, rebounds, assists, over-under for teams, the spreads. It's been a lot of fun. These playoffs have been fun. They've been even better since I've been getting in on the action over at FanDuel. Also, the baseball has been really cool. I've been building parlays on like players that I think will get a hit, and had some nice hits there as well. No pun intended. So check it out. Make these sports even more exciting. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time for you to sign up. You head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's get into this target distribution recipe here. I'm going to go through the targets, and I'll tell you how many I think each player gets. And this is difficult because I'll be honest with you, I wish I had more targets to distribute, but you can see how 490 feels like the right amount. 30 a game, take out 4% for throwaway spikes and batted balls. You got 490 to distribute. I think that the Bills' leading target getter will be Khalil Shakir. And I have him projected for 90 targets in 2025. Last year in 2024, he had 100 targets, which wound up being 21.2% of the Bills' targets. I have him at 90, which is a little bit under in terms of percentage, 18.37%. So a lot of volume going to Khalil Shakir, but not Diggs volume, right? Or like, these other receivers that get 150 targets, right? 90. I think that's the most a player on the Bills will get is 90, which is also the number that I have for Dalton Kincaid. I have Dalton Kincaid getting 90 targets. He had 75 last year. Of course, he missed some time, but he had 18.1% of the Bills' targets last year. I have him at 18.37% this year. Remember this stat with Dalton Kincaid. Last year, per route run, he was the highest volume target of any tight end in the NFL per route run. When Dalton Kincaid's healthy and on the field, they want to throw him the football. Obviously, a big year 3, a lot of expectations, has to meet the promise of being the first round pick the Bills traded up to get, right? Be the mismatch player. And I think he's going to have an opportunity to do that. And so I think your top 2 players that this passing game is going to be funneled through, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, both coming in at 90 targets. And again, look, things will fluctuate. I'm giving you a thought exercise, and it's not going to be perfect, but hopefully this gets us into the right ballpark so we can have the right conversation. So Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, 90 targets each to tie for the team lead. Then I have 2 players tied for, I guess it would be third. I have Josh Palmer and Keon Coleman with 60 targets each. And that would be 12.24% of the target share in Buffalo. So 90 for Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid, 60 for Palmer and Coleman. Coleman last year had 57 targets. And of course, we know he missed some time. That wound up being 14.4% of the Bills' targets. I have him down about 2% this year in terms of volume of targets. And I think we can still measure growth for Keon Coleman. I just don't know if it's in a volume role as a perimeter X receiver, right? Like if there's going to be a lot of volume for Keon Coleman, I think that comes with him playing more in the slot. But I don't think that's the plan for the Bills. And so because of that, I think 60 targets based on the way things look right now feels right for me. Josh Palmer, I would love to have more his way, but he is a new player that is entering this mix, and there will be a little bit of a curve, of course, to establish chemistry. 60 still a lot. Like, I think people felt the impact of Mac Hollins last year. Well, he had 50 targets, right? Like, that's not that many. It's 10 more, but I think you'll still feel his impact in 60 targets. It's about 3.5 targets per game on average. The reality is, I've said it now multiple times, I wish I had more targets to distribute. I don't. I would give, if I went into this without holding myself to like the reality of how many passing attempts are going to be, I'd have Shakir at 110. I'd have Kincaid at 100. I'd have Palmer at 80 to 90. I've had Coleman at 80 to 90. I don't have it. I don't have that many passing attempts to distribute. So working within the realistic parameters, that's how I have the top 4 target getters for this offense stacking up. Kincaid and Shakir with 90, Palmer and Coleman with 60. So I think that's where the most of your passing attempts are going to go. Then you get to this next cluster of players. And I'll call it the Elijah Moore, Curtis Samuel, James Cook cluster, where I have 45 targets going to Elijah Moore. I have 35 going to Curtis Samuel, and I also have 35 going to James Cook. Figuring out Elijah Moore's role is challenging for me. I like the player. I like the skill set. How much volume he eats up in this offense, I don't have no idea. Right now, I have him at 9.18% of targets going his way at 45. For Curtis Samuel, he missed time last year, but he still was pretty high in terms of percentage of targets. Like, he was actually 4th on the team in percentage of targets, 10.5%, 46 targets last year for Curtis Samuel. I actually have that going down, right, to 7.14% and 35 total targets for Curtis Samuel. Sorting out the Moore and Samuel roles, complete guess, right? I have no idea. You could tell me that of the combined 80 targets I have going to them, that it could look a lot of different ways for how those targets are distributed, including one of those players potentially not even being relevant at all in this offense. So 45 to Moore, 35 to Samuel. I also have 35 going to James Cook. He had 38 targets last year, and so pretty close to where James Cook lands. Now, I think James Cook has a skill set that should require more opportunities in the passing game, but I think that's where, him not playing 2-minute and being trusted in pass pro takes him off the field, and he loses some target opportunities in the passing game. Then I have Dawson Knox with 25 targets. He had 33 last year. Maybe that was inflated a little for Knox because Kincaid missed some time. But 25 targets for Dawson Knox, 20 for Ray Davis, which is right where he was last year. He had 19 last year. 20 for Ty Johnson. He had 25 last year. And then the other bucket would be 10. So this would be your Jackson Hawes, your Reggie Gilliam, if some other receiver gets called off the practice squad. Like, that's your dump of random targets that would go out there. So 10 random targets to distribute, which is pretty close to where the Bills landed last year. If you look at the other bucket, Quentin Morris 8, Zach Davidson 2, Tyrell Shavers 1. That's kind of a similar thing. I think you could see maybe Jackson Hawes getting 8 or 10 targets, and I'm not sure there'll be any other players getting targets based on how precious they are in this offense. And speaks to what the Bills want to be. When they say everybody eats, it's about everybody eating. And when you have opportunities, you better make the most of them, because you're probably not getting that many. You're probably not getting that many based on this infrastructure and just how many times the Bills realistically are going to throw the football. And so that's how I have it. Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid with 90, Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman 60, Elijah Moore 45, Curtis Samuel 35, James Cook 35, Dawson Knox 25, Ray Davis 20, Ty Johnson 10, 20, and other 10. All right, coming up next, I want to get into some key variables and my key takeaways from this project and get into a conversation, an important conversation about a certain group of players that I really hope get way more targets this year than what I'm projecting. We'll do that here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. All right. You probably listened to that and thought to yourself, boy, it's a little light. Certainly thought more targets were going to go to different players. I'd love for you to do it. If you agree with, you should agree with me on the 490 targets. I think it's completely defendable how I got there. Average of 30 a game, 30 passing attempts per game. Take 4% out for throwaways, spikes and batted balls. You got 490 targets to distribute. If you greatly disagree with me, send it. Do it yourself. You have 490 targets. You got to spread them out to all those players. You show me what actually makes sense. I'd love to see it. I really would. Because I sweated over this thing. I started working on this Wednesday morning, and it felt like I was all day before I got to a point where I'm like, yeah, I think this is the path that I like. And I talked to like 7 other people to bounce ideas off of. Some of my big takeaways. Again, number one, this assumes no injuries, and that will impact things, but we cannot predict it. I mean, if somebody misses time, well, guess what? Targets are going to go differently, right? They're going to be eaten up by some other players. Number two, this will take on a life of its own. Chemistry is going to be established differently with different players, and that's going to fluctuate things. You know, could Dalton Kincaid be a monster this year and demand more? Yes, can certainly see that. Could Josh Allen really start clicking with Josh Palmer or Keon Coleman or Elijah Moore? Absolutely. Absolutely. We could see that. And all of a sudden they claim more. Curtis Samuel, like maybe there's a lot more there that we're not considering. So keep in mind, like if Josh is hot throwing the ball to Keon Coleman and that takes off, like, all right, time to adjust. You know, this is right now factoring most likely outcome. Number three, and this felt heavy to me as I was working through this. It feels like one of Elijah Moore or Curtis Samuel will probably be irrelevant in this offense. I have 35 targets going to Samuel, 45 to Moore. That is 80 combined targets. You could tell me that, I mean, honestly, 70 of those go to one and 10 the other. I'd believe you. I think that's where you have a lot of opportunity for things shifting around. I'd say the same thing about Palmer and Coleman. I have 120 targets committed to those two players. You could tell me that goes a lot of unique ways in terms of distribution. 120 targets. It could be an 80-40 thing. We'll see how that goes. But that's what I mean. Like chemistry is going to happen. Things will fluctuate. But I think you can look at those as like clusters and realize that one could impact the other. But also, ultimately, again, I think there is a path where Elijah Moore or Curtis Samuel is just not a relevant player in this offense. Number four, I've said this a bunch of times. I wish I had more targets to distribute. I wish I did. If I had another 100 targets, boy, everyone would be happy. I don't have another 100 targets because I don't think the Bills are going to throw the ball enough times to get to 590 targets. I don't think they're going to. Like I said, as a team, the Bills were 26th in passing attempts in 2024, 28th in percentage of plays that were passes, 5th in percentage of plays that were runs. Where are the passing attempts coming from other than the Bills structurally become a way different offense this year? I don't think they're going to. I think they like the offense they had last year, the style. And here's one of my biggest takeaways. I probably should have said this way earlier in the show. I hope the Bills throw the football to running backs way more. It is a wildly successful part of this Bills offense. Last year, let me give you some numbers. Last year, when throwing the ball to running backs compared to other teams throwing the ball to running backs, the Bills were number one in EPA per pass attempt to running backs, number one in yards per attempt to running backs, number one in passer rating to running backs, number one in adjusted net yards per attempt to running backs, number one in touchdown passes to running backs, 20th in passing attempts to running backs, 74. Just 74 attempts. That was 20th. You're the best in the league at throwing the ball to running backs. And despite being 20th in attempts, you were third in yards. Good things happen when Josh Allen throws the ball to running backs. I want to see more of it. And I think that's a part of this that could blow up the whole thing. Right now, I have 35 targets for Cook, 20 to Davis, 20 to Johnson. That's 75 attempts. I'm very dangerous for me to do math on the fly, but 35 plus 20 plus 20, that's 75, which is exactly, I had 74 passing attempts last year to running backs. If the Bills maintain that level of efficiency, throwing the ball to running backs, boy, I hope they double the attempts. And you figure it out from there. Heck, turn more of your run plays into passing attempts to running backs if you got to do it. So an interesting thought exercise. We'll see how this plays out. And again, I will get eyes on this football team at camp, and that will obviously impact where my final projections come, which will come, after I spend a week with the Bills and get eyes on this team, and we get a feel for where the opportunities are at, who they're featuring. You can kind of get a feel. But as of right now, this is what feels right to me. But at the same time, it feels so wrong, because I wish I had more passing attempts to distribute, but that's just not the Bills. I repeat, the Bills are not a high volume passing offense. They're not. And because of that, it's very difficult to get to a place where you feel like all of your worthy targets are getting the volume. You're getting the volume that you feel like maybe they should. But whatever leads to the Bills having a great offense and scoring a lot of points, winning games, that's what I want to see. And that recipe for the Bills has been running the ball and then being efficient in the passing game. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope that this got your mind spinning a little bit. It certainly did mine. Working through this, my head's been all over the place today, figuring this thing out. And so we'll see where it lands. And again, I'd love to see how you have it. If you are on YouTube, leave a comment. 490 targets, spread them out. If you're part of the subtext, hit me up. If you're on our Discord channel, hit me up. I want to see it. I want to see how other people approach this. But I think 490 targets is the right amount to spread around. All right, folks, that's it for today. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.